Binge the full week of The Ray Taylor Show ad-free over at inspireddisorder.com/plus.
This is The Ray Taylor Show.
Swipe up 179. This is the show where I share my opinions on current events and really give content for those that want to hate me. This is the content I produce for people to hate, or at least for those that cry about my opinion to be able to attack me in my comment section on YouTube and TikTok and Instagram and all the different places all these fragile people love to cry about me on my comments. So it's really something I cherish, and I respect the power that I wield to make people hate with my opinion. But let's get it started, shall we, with this first story. Who's driving those food delivery robots? Of course, robots will eventually take over most jobs in most industries, whether it's driving, delivering, manufacturing, all of these jobs that people get barely paid minimum wage to do are going to be going to robots before we know it. But the crazy thing is that these food delivery robots, which, I would imagine if you live in a city of some sort that you are probably more likely to see these robots. I have not seen one in person. I do not live in a city, but they are there. I've seen videos of them show up on social media where it's just somebody walking down the sidewalk. They see one of these robots driving down the sidewalk, delivering food, usually. And this article is talking about how there are people that are actually controlling these robots remotely. At least not fully. I'm sure there's a big part of the aspect of these robots is to be autonomous, but these people are there behind the scenes in case the robots come into any problems. If they, get off track, if they need to troubleshoot, if there's an issue, if they need to be rescued. Or sometimes they will just get on a bicycle themselves to go deliver the food if the robot, I would imagine, gets broken and is unable to deliver the food. Which, as somebody who's delivered food for Uber Eats and Postmates in a vehicle, I would much rather be piloting a robot than out just destroying my vehicle driving food to people that will most likely not tip me. Most people don't tip. In my experience, driving all of these rideshare gigs and delivery gigs is really just seeing how little people value the service that they provide. And it is sad. And it's sad that the people that say that they're going to tip are generally the people that don't tip. They want to get the benefit of saying they're going to tip. They want to get that pat on the back of them, at least thinking about it. But generally, those are the people that don't tip. So if you hear somebody say that, if somebody's going to tip you, they don't tell you they're going to tip you. They just tip you, in my experience. But yeah, and apparently a lot of gamers are getting these jobs, which I wouldn't mind. I'm not a big gamer, but it's not like this is it's not like you're flying a drone through a warehouse. I mean, driving one of these delivery robots that's not moving very fast is a gig that I could easily get into. But yeah, kind of interesting to see the behind the scenes. That there are still people behind these robots, but for the most part, it's a lot of robots. It's a lot of robots. And some people picking up a controller now and then to help them out. Kind of interesting world we're getting into. Where a kid's summer job could be remotely piloting delivery robots in a city. I haven't seen any of these out in Palm Springs or anything, or in La Quinta where I live specifically. But anyway, let's move on. The Many Faces is an ongoing abstract ink portrait series that I started many years ago I release a new face every day, but go to inspireddisorder.com to check them out. So many available. But as a listener to The Ray Taylor Show, you can save 10% when you use coupon code INSPIRED when you check out. So go to inspireddisorder.com/TMF. That stands for The Many Faces. Go check them out. Browse the entire collection. And when you decide on a piece, or maybe multiple pieces, make sure you use coupon code INSPIRED when you check out, and you'll save 10% as a big thank you for checking out my work, for collecting my work, and for listening to The Ray Taylor Show. And with that said, let's get back to the show. To just a heartbreaking story, because I can't see this going well. Heartbreaking story. Let me read this. We cannot ignore the fact that if Brittney Greene wasn't a black woman, it would be plastered across the news that she's being held as a political prisoner in Russia. That's from Representative Cori Bush, Democrat from Missouri, via Twitter. And of course, for everybody that doesn't know, Brittney Greene is a WNBA player who was flying through Russia or was leaving Russia, got stopped in Russia for having a vape cartridge of weed. Now, I've seen articles say that it's just a vape cartridge that don't necessarily say it's weed. It is Russia. There is clearly things going on with Russia invading a country known as Ukraine. So kind of crazy times in Russia in general, and even pre-war, Russia, not the most copacetic, not the coolest spot to get caught doing something in. And weed, despite the fact that I think it should be legal, I consume it on a regular basis. It is a safe plant that has never harmed a human life, is not responsible for ending a human life in the history of humans. You can literally drink more water. You could drink too much water and kill yourself. But there is not enough weed you could take to end your life. It is impossible. That's how safe marijuana is. But even in the United States, there are many places in this country where weed is very illegal. And there are many countries where weed is very illegal. So if it is true that this basketball player, Brittney, had a vape cartridge on her, that is not a smart decision on her part, if it's true. Let's say, for argument's sake, that it is true, that she had a vape cartridge like this, filled with weed, like this one is. I would not, I've definitely heard of people flying with it within the U.S. If I was going to Canada, I probably wouldn't be worried about it. Certain parts of Europe, especially if I was going to like Amsterdam, wouldn't be worried about it. Also, probably wouldn't be bringing it with me if I was going to a place like that. But if I'm going to a place like Russia, if I'm going to a place like China, if I'm going to any of these countries that clearly think of weed as if it is the most dangerous substance you can have, because they are still controlling their population with that propaganda that weed is dangerous, I wouldn't be caught dead with any of that stuff. Now, maybe she didn't know she had it on her. Maybe it was just in her bag. That's happened before. Maybe it was planted on her bag. That could definitely happen. Cops in the U.S. plant stuff on people all the time. It wouldn't be crazy that somebody in Russia would do that. Which, in that case, if it was planted on her, then that's horrible. That is, it's horrible regardless. She should just be sent back to the U.S., right? Let the U.S. deal with it. Whatever laws she broke. But, if she knowingly brought a vape cartridge into Russia, that's like, you failed an IQ test in that moment. That's what that is, right? It's like it's like these athletes that get popped for steroids in organizations that only test for steroids once a year. Like, they don't do the USADA random drug testing pool thing like the UFC does. They do the thing that other fight organizations do, where it's just they test you once a year, and if you're smart, you cycle off the steroids so that when you test, you don't test positive, or that your levels aren't like all wackadoo like they would be if you were taking steroids, right? So people that get busted in those organizations for taking steroids, those people failed an IQ test. And if you get busted with a weed vape cartridge overseas in a country that you know is not a place you want to get busted with weed, that's kind of on you. So it's hard to really have a lot of sympathy. Now, clearly this all could be bullshit, and maybe she didn't. She says she's innocent. I haven't read anything into it, right? Because it's just a lot of hearsay. It's like, what? It's so impossible to know if the information you read on any given subject is legitimate, right? When it comes to the pandemic stuff, I rely on scientists that study this stuff and what their opinions are, right? As far as this is concerned, like, everything's an opinion. Nobody knows what really happened. Britney knows. And she's, as far as what you are how you're going to handle it logistically to try and get your freedom, I don't think, saying that you intentionally had something, you knowingly had something, is a position you want to take in Russia. Like, you want to probably say you didn't know it was there. You want to distance yourself as much as you can from it. So, hopefully, you want to talk about a hashtag Free Britney. This I care more about than a conservatorship that somebody that, may or may not be mentally well was put in. I mean, not that the conservatorship of Britney Spears was a legitimate thing that should have happened, but like, that's, she's not in a Russian prison. Let's put it that way. The freedom that Britney Spears had in her conservatorship was far more than what Brittney Greene has in a Russian prison right now. Light years different. So I would definitely support this hashtag of Free Britney for sure. And hopefully she gets out of there. But it's like, when I heard the news, I'm like, well, assuming that the news is right, that she was traveling knowingly with a vape cartridge, she's kind of an idiot. I mean, you got to know that weed is super legal in a lot of places still. I live in California, where it is about as legal as you can have it. But I know that, like, if I'm driving through Texas, I could easily go to prison. If I'm driving through different states, I got to know that, like, it's a possibility that shit could go down. And not to mention in a different country that's already, like, Russia is just a step or two away from North Korea. I mean, there is more similarities between Russia and North Korea than there are differences. I mean, there are North Korean slave camps in Russia. That's how connected Russia and North Korea are. And I wouldn't go to South Korea with weed. And I don't even know what their laws are. I would just assume. It's like, if I need it, and it's okay there, then I'll get it there. But I don't need to be taking stuff, because then that's a whole nother thing. Like, transporting weed. Anyway, I feel bad because it's not something that should be illegal at all. But also, we live in a crazy world where it is. And, I feel bad. Hopefully she gets released. Free Britney, for sure. But, I have my concessions. I can't, like, go all in on it, because it's like, on some level, you gotta, like, unless it's all bullshit, in which case I should just really research these stories more. But let's move on, shall we, to some news, some good news. Especially if you are a fan of the Scream franchise, if you are a fan of the most recent Scream, which I was. I love the franchise in general. I think it's a great horror franchise. And I think the newest installment is one of the best in the franchise, and made me really happy to see that this franchise can live on past Wes Craven. And their Scream sequel heads to theaters in March 2023. So next year, they're going to be pumping out another Scream movie. Hopefully with the same crew. Ghostface will slice and dice again next year. Scream 6 is set for March 31st, 2023 via Deadline. So I'm happy about that. Be interested to see where they take the franchise. You know, I loved how everything in the newest one, a lot of references to the Stab franchise. That's the movie franchise within the universe of this movie. That's in reference to the franchise itself. It's crazy. The things that they can take with that one character who is hallucinating, Billy Loomis. That character could easily snap and be considered the killer in the new one. It'll be interesting. And I read another thing or saw another post that Gale Weathers is going to be back. Courtney Cox will be reprising her role as Gale Weathers, which is good. I would imagine her and Sidney Prescott would be in it. I don't see why not. As far as the original cast, they are two of the only survivors. I believe there might be more that have survived, but I'm stoked for it. I was surprisingly pleased with Scream 5, and so this news, despite it is a horror franchise, so I don't have a problem with horror franchises releasing new. I mean, they were the first genre of film to really pump out sequels, despite the fact that that's widespread now with all movies. Is kind of disappointing, but having the Scream franchise live on, I'm stoked for. Join Inspired Disorder Plus today. Head on over to inspireddisorder.com/plus to join. Membership includes members-only discounts and deals. You get access to the Ray Taylor Show completely ad-free, as well as bonus episodes. You get access to the complete live painting archive. You also get access to every single podcast ever produced by Inspired Disorder, hosted by Ray Taylor. You get access to Ray Taylor's personal blog, as well as the opportunity to ask me any questions. So if you want to start a podcast, you're into art, ask me anything. And so many more things are being added every day to Inspired Disorder Plus. So sign up today, become a member, head on over to inspireddisorder.com/plus and become an Inspired Disorder Plus member today. Let's move on to our final piece of news, which I am also stoked for. Netflix has announced a release date for Russian Doll Season 2. This is a great show. Russian Doll came out like early pandemic or just before the pandemic. You have it's like a time loop TV show where the main character is reliving the same day over and over again, and each time she relives the day, something small has changed. And in the first season, she's gone through the cycle of that same day so many times that things start to get kind of surreal towards the end of the season. I love it. It is such a fun show, so well written, so well performed. Let me read this. In a new video, Netflix announced that Russian Doll Season 2 will premiere all 7 of its 30-minute episodes on Wednesday, April 20th. So it's coming up next month. Super excited for that, and I will do a review for sure. The series won Emmy Awards for lead actress in a comedy series and outstanding comedy series in 2019. So it's right before the pandemic. The second season will follow Natasha Lyonne, who is the star of the show. She is amazing. I loved Natasha ever since the American Pie movies, but she was also great in the Orange is the New Black series that was on Netflix, and now this one being her kind of her star vehicle. I love it, and she's also I think she's the creator of the show as well. So it follows Nadia, who's played by Natasha Lyonne, and Alan, played by Charlie Barnett. Second season will follow them 4 years after they escaped their own hellish Groundhog Day, only to discover that time isn't done terrorizing them. So it's 4 years after the events. That's great. That's great. First off, great, because it has felt like 4 years since the first season. But it'll be interesting to see what they do now that they've escaped. I'm also excited to rewatch the first season in preparation for the second season. It will also introduce a few new characters, including ones played by Schitt's Creek alum Annie Murphy and District 9 star Sharito Copley. So great news. I'm excited for season 2 of Russian Doll. Very anticipated. I forget if this was on my list for most anticipated TV shows. Like, now that the pandemic, now that everybody's pretending that the pandemic is over, and all this whole wave of like movies that have been held back and TV shows that have been held back, and you know, some had to have been put on hold because of the pandemic, and some were just held after they were done, you know, post-production, are all, it's like a flood of new content coming out. But Russian Doll was one that I loved. And it's just the time loop narrative, the time loop trope, the genre of time loop is such a fun, like, storytelling trope, storytelling device that I love in movies. If you want to I did my top 5 time loop movies list probably a year or two ago. So you can search on YouTube top 5 time loop movies, Ray Taylor Show, and it will show up. But that was a fun one to go through, because there's a lot of great time loop movies out there that play around with that kind of storytelling style, and I appreciate it. So looking forward to Russian Doll Season 2. That is it. Let's do some shout-outs and get out of here, shall we? Shout out to LA Times. Shout out Now This News. Shout out Deadline. And shout out /film. But most importantly, shout out to you. New episodes of The Ray Taylor Show come out every single day. Subscribe on YouTube and everywhere our podcasts are found. Binge the full week over at inspireddisorder.com/plus. Buy Ray Taylor Show merch over at inspireddisorder.com. And follow the show on Instagram at Ray Taylor Show. Have a wonderful day, everybody. Peace out!
Today is the day where you wake up and you realize that everything that you've been dreaming about, everything that you've been wanting, every goal and wish and hope that you've ever had can become real. Dreams can come true. What you manifest in your mind, you can bring to reality.